Go ahead and start.
All right.
Well,
All right.
I messed that up today.
Gotta love technical difficulties, right?
I am so sorry.
No problem at all.
Yeah, that was that issue where we couldn't turn the sound off. But hello, everybody,
Yes.
and welcome to our second attempt at Let's Talk North Carolina Genealogy. And I'm Renate Yarborough Sanders, one of your co-hosts. Happy to be back with you again today.
Great. And I'm Taneya Koonce, also another one of your co-hosts, and we're so glad to have everyone tuning in with us as we talk about North Carolina marriage records.
Drew, you want to say hi?
Hello, this is Drusilla Pair, and I'm excited to be here.
All right. So hopefully things are going to get better than the way that they started. You know, it's just so much going on right now in this world of ours. And I don't know about you, Taneya and Drew, but I am really feeling a little overwhelmed and just kind of emotional and just kind of disturbed about things these days. So I'm just going to go ahead and put a disclaimer out that on top of all of that and having a bad allergy day, that what you just saw is probably not the first mess up I'm going to have on this episode. So I'm going to apologize in advance if I'm just a little bit off today, because things are just a lot right now.
Yes, there certainly just is so much going on. And, you know, one good thing about our hobbies such as genealogy is it gives us a chance to really, you know, spend some time looking into our family history. So I think it's important that we are able to do this at this time period, right?
Yes, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Hope that everybody, I've been doing a lot, you know, looking at the numerous documents that I've collected over 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And discovering new things. We all should do that at some point, look at them again.
Very true. Very good point.
Yep. So today, as Taneya said, we are going to talk about North Carolina marriage records. And just to kind of remind everybody about our mission for this summer, we just wanted to kind of really focus in on what it's like to be a North Carolina genealogy researcher. And we just wanted to kind of build a community with all of you who are also researching ancestors in North Carolina. So we appreciate those who have already responded to the poll in the chat as to what your experience level is. We do see a lot of our friends and family who are advanced and intermediate researchers, and a few who are beginners. And we thank you for bearing with us through these vital records episodes, because we really want to reach out to people at all levels, which means we have to reach out to people who are just getting started. And vital records are really kind of where it begins, along with census records. So hopefully you're finding some new information no matter what your level is. I know that in the research that we've done to prepare, all of us have found things that we weren't aware of. And we've been at this for a very long time. So we're going to get started today with Taneya, who's going to give an overview of North Carolina marriage records.
Great. So I'll go ahead and share my screen, and hopefully that works all right. So we thought it'd be helpful just to start with a high-level overview of what to expect when you're looking for marriage records in North Carolina. Ladies, are y'all able to see my screen share? Perfect. Yes. Glad to know it's coming through. So essentially, a good place to start is to look at some important time and dates. And when we look at the history of North Carolina as a state, and actually before it was a state. So one important timeline to keep in mind is that prior to 1741, there were a series of marriage acts passed that regulated how marriages could be conducted. And when we look at the availability of those records, it's pretty limited. Family Search actually does have some records for Perkins and Pasquotank counties. You can see those images online. Oh, sidebar, any links that we refer to in the show today, we will put in the description after the episode is over. So you don't have to worry about trying to jot down any URLs, because we'll have them all linked for you. Then in 1741, we see new laws enacted or new acts passed. And at this point, we start to see marriage bans and bonds, and we'll be discussing those later in the episode. Now, 1851 was an important year because this was the year when clergy and other justices of the peace who were conducting marriages were required to file the marriage return. So this is the proof that the marriage actually happened. So that came about in 1851. In 1866, North Carolina passed legislation that asked that individuals who've been cohabitating and been formerly enslaved could go to their local counties and register their cohabitation. We'll be discussing cohabitation records in a later episode in this series. Isn't that right, Renata?
Yes.
So it's just important to keep that in mind, that 1866 is a seminal date for individuals who'd been formerly enslaved. 1868 is another important year in the history of the state because at this point we have marriage licenses now required. They are the official document of marriage for the state, and this was at the county level. And in 1962, statewide registration is required. So these are helpful times and dates to keep in mind as you're looking at marriage records. Now, there are, of course, many places you can get marriage records, so we just wanted to touch on a few, Ancestry and Family Search a little bit. If you go to Ancestry's card catalog, you can search North Carolina marriage, and you'll see some of the collections that they have. The largest one being the North Carolina Marriage Records, 1741 to 2011. This is a collection that has more than 10 million records, and it's a variety of bonds, licenses, certificates, and it covers 87 counties. And this has images as well as indexes. And then a smaller collection of 2.7 million, as you'll see listed towards the bottom, is a North Carolina Marriage Index, 1741 to 2004. So this is just an index. It covers about 75 counties, and these marriages come from a variety of sources. But you have other choices available to you. I believe Drew is going to cover Family Search a little bit, but there are 3 great collections at Family Search. I'll just put the slide up here so you can see it. I don't necessarily feel we need to talk through it, but Family Search is such a great source for marriage information in the state that we just wanted to make sure everyone knew about it if you hadn't had
And
the...
it's free 99.
It's free, that's right, if you hadn't had the opportunity. So these are definitely important to check out. And again, we'll have links to them in the description. And before we pass it on, we just wanted to say, if you find an indication of a marriage record, but not the actual record, we are so fortunate in North Carolina when it comes to our public records. Oh my goodness, aren't we, ladies? Because
North Carolina is where it's at.
if you need a public record copy of a marriage certificate or record, you can get it. They're public records. Anyone can request it. So one of the cheap ways to do it is go directly to the county, and they'll likely be able to help you. So.
Which courthouse is that, Taneya?
This is Washington County. In fact, this is where my family's from, Eastern North Carolina. So I've been to the outside of the county courthouse. I've not actually been in, but had to take a picture, had to.
Well, that's one of my most recently discovered lines is my connection to Somerset Plantation right there in Cresswell. So I haven't been there yet. That's why I didn't recognize the courthouse.
Yes,
so
yes. Maybe we'll plan a trip together.
Yeah, that'd be
once
great.
all this is over.
Yeah.
So I'll stop sharing my screen and we can pass it along. So let me see here. Stop sharing. All right.
Oh, I guess that means it's my turn. All right. So I'm going to pick up and I need to share my screen now. And Taneya, why don't you tell everybody why you're able to share your screen so much more quickly and easier than I am?
I don't know. Why am I able to share my screen more quickly and easily?
The thing about opening up the slides.
Oh, yes. Yes. So I was able to open up my slides ahead of time in presentation mode because I have 2 screens. Now, if you have one screen, it's harder to do that because if you're in presentation mode, guess what happens? Everything else goes away.
Right. So the little issue that I had last week on the birth records, and I told you guys I was going to work on it and correct it. I cannot correct it just yet because I am a 1-screen household. So unless I have a second screen coming my way, donations are welcome. You'll have to give me that minute to put everything in full
what
screen.
happens to me is that as I'm looking at my second screen, my attention goes this way. So unfortunately, if you're looking at me, you'll see me looking off camera because I'm looking at my second screen.
All right. So I'm going to be talking to you about North Carolina marriage bans and North Carolina marriage bonds. And we're going to start off with bans because they were the earliest kind of thing that was going on, really starting back in 1663, where there were some marriage laws in effect, but there was no requirement for the documentation to be submitted to the court or the clerk or anything. So that's why we don't have records extant from that period. But marriage bans or proclamations, as they actually were, originated in the Church of England. And in those early days, the North Carolinians, the first North Carolinians, were still following Virginia law, and Virginia law was based on the law from the Church of England. And so that's why these bans were used. And what they were was public announcements of couples' intent to marry. These would be announced in churches for 3 Sundays in a row. And that was what the requirement was. But in addition to that, they were sometimes posted in public places, and occasionally you could find them in newspapers. And I'm going to show you an example of that in just a second. The purpose of the bans was to allow time for anybody in the community who had an objection to make that objection. And that was so that they could prevent any invalid marriages from taking place. So some of the reasons for that would be that the person, one or either the groom, prospective groom or bride, was actually already married. That's a pretty good reason not to get married again. Maybe someone had taken a vow of celibacy. Perhaps they had been trying to be a nun or a priest and they vowed celibacy, so they should not be getting married. A lack of consent for underage groom or an underage bride, or the couple being, this is my favorite one, related within the prohibited degrees of kinship. And that situation was such that once it was stated into law, you were not to marry anyone closer than the first cousin level. So Taneya and I have chatted about this, and we were like, okay, what's closer than the first cousin level? So apparently you can't marry your brother or your sister, your sibling. You shouldn't marry one of your parents. You shouldn't marry your grandparent, your aunt, your uncle, or your half sibling. Anything else is fine. And that is why a lot of us do see marriages between first cousins and beyond in our family trees. And I see that more with my European ancestors than I do with my ancestors of color. Have you noticed
I would
that?
say the same. I do have in my tree of second cousins that married, but I've not seen any first cousins. Oh, wait,
Okay.
well, of course not first cousins, but second cousins I have.
Okay, I have first cousins.
That as well.
Yeah. Okay. So what would happen after the 3 weeks of the bans, if there were no objections, a certificate would be issued to the couple that they're now allowed to marry, and they would be able to marry. I created this term. This is a Renate Yarborough Sanders term, wed in place. And what that means is they could get married where they were. So where if they had a clergy person right there in their area of town, that clergy person could come to their home. They could get married in their local church. They didn't have to go to the town center or the clerk's office or the magistrate's office to be married. One of the, I guess, the good things about the bans is that it eliminated the need to post bond, which we're going to talk about next, which required you to have some financial means. And it also was faster. It was more quick to do this through the bans. All you needed was 3 free weeks. I'll say no public records because they weren't required to create them, but some people may find something because the bans really didn't have to be in writing. It could just be announced in the church for the 3 weeks. So only in a case where it was published in the newspaper or maybe someone put a flyer up would we even have a chance of knowing about it at this point. The bans were repealed in 1867 in favor of the procedures that Drusilla is going to be sharing with you. So here is an example, and I really wasn't able to find nice, clear, pretty examples. This is the best I can do. showing the banns of marriage between George Harding of this parish. Remember, I don't think I said it, but it's got to be done in where the bride is located, but it often was done in both locations if the bride and groom didn't live in the same place. But between George Harding of this parish and Jane Darlington of the parish of Backford. And it's telling that they were published on these 3 dates, April 21st, April 28th, and May 5th of 1776. So they've done their due diligence. They've had their 3 weeks. Nobody has objected. And so then they were married in the church by banns, and meaning that that was the only requirement they had to have. And then the rest of the information is telling you, you know, the date that they were married, who the witnesses were. You still had to have witnesses, and who performed the ceremony. Now, by contrast, this is a newspaper article showing that the banns of marriage between Miss Catherine Geiger of Miami, Florida, and Mr. Thomas M. Donovan of Maysville were proclaimed for the first time at morning services Sunday at St. Patrick's Church by the Reverend Edward B. Rohr. No date has been set for the wedding, which will take place in Jesus Church, Miami. Now, so this is just an announcement that the first one has been made. They still have to do what? 2 more weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And this article goes on. I didn't even use the full article, but this article goes on to give a whole lot more information, more like what you might see today in an engagement announcement, but it didn't have to. They were really just letting the public know that this couple would like to marry. So then the next thing is North Carolina marriage bonds, which also were available from 1669 to 1868. This is where you need to have a little bit of financial stability. Bonds were payments or promises of payments, and I really should have put that on there, 'cause in most cases they weren't actually paying the money, but it was kind of like a promise of a payment made by the groom and one other person as a way of ensuring, again, that there's no legal obstacle to the marriage. Same concerns that were mentioned in the bans would be the same concerns here. These would be made in the county where the bride resided and would then be followed by a license. The marriage then could be performed by the clergy, a clergy member, or the magistrate. The bonds give you much more genealogically rich information. You'll have the names of the bondsman, the bride, the groom, and at least one witness. And sometimes that witness would just be the clerk. The date of the bond and the amount, which was set by the state, it started off at 50 pounds and was raised to 500 pounds. That date can be really great if you aren't finding any other record of an ancestor's marriage. But just remember that the bond does not assure you that a marriage ever took place. So it can give you a kind of a period of time to work with to look for a marriage, but you don't know there's a marriage until you find proof of it.
Mm-hmm.
It also gives you the place of residence of the bride and groom. After 1850, you might also find the names of their parents. And then this was also retained after 1850 by the county clerk. So again, just a couple of examples. This was actually a very small document. I blew it up just so you could see it, but it's really a very small piece of paper. These are my one set of my third great grandparents, Simon Dunstan and Susan Reed in Franklin County, North Carolina. These were free people of color who, whatever was being done in the larger community is exactly the same way it was done with the free people of color. And you can see on this bond, we acknowledge ourselves to be indebted to the state of North Carolina in the sum of 500 pounds, but to be void on condition that there is no lawful cause to obstruct a marriage between Simon Dunstan and Susan Reed. And then you see that there's a witness signature, and you also see the clerk's signature and the date. It gives you the date, which I can't make this out. I'm like, is that a 5? Is it a 1? I don't know what date that is, but I do know it was December
Yes.
of 1846. So I wanted to show you this because I want you to see the contrast in how these documents can look, even though they're all giving you the same information. But what really was notable about this one to me is that there wasn't another bonds person. It was just Simon.
Just them, yeah.
And so this one shows you that they could also be completely handwritten and not have the fill in the blank aspect. I am not going to read this craziness, but I can tell you that this is another one of my third great grandfathers. This is a European ancestor, Philemon Hawkins, marrying his first wife, Mildred Twitty, who was not my third great grandmother. And it gives that same information, but he did have a bondsman by the name of John Scott, excuse me. And you see John Scott's signature right there. And then this last one, this is really fun because this is yet another set of my third great grandparents. Remember, you have 16 sets of them. This is another free couple of color in Tyrrell County, North Carolina. And this is, ooh, don't do that. Oh, that's not what need to happen. And so this is Charn Hill, which is my third great grandfather, and his bondsman, Starkey Phelps. So when you see that bondsman, you want to research that person. If you don't know who it is, you want to research that person because that's someone who's in your ancestors fan club, that friends, associates, and neighbors. So I still don't know who Starkey was to my third great grandfather. I'm working on it. I have some posts out trying to get help about that. But right now, I don't know what his relationship was. I do know he was close in age to my third great grandfather, probably about 7 or 8 years younger. Maybe he was just a friend, but he could have been a cousin. I don't know. But it's the same information. Charn Hill and Starkey Phelps are held and firmly bound unto His Excellency H.G. Burton. And it goes on and on with the same information. The rich information you need is that it was the 20th day of June of 1825. It goes on to say that Charn is bound and that he's applying for a license to be married between him and Gracie Bryant in the county of Tyrrell. All of this is information you may not have had before. And it goes on to show everybody's signature or their mark there at the bottom. So that's my part. I'm just talking about North Carolina bands and bonds. And now we will go on to Drusilla, who is going to talk to us about what happened next. And Drusilla, just let me know when to click for you.
Okay, can you put that in slideshow mode?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
As I can move this bar, you go right ahead.
Everyone. I'm Drusilla Pair, and I've been doing research for over 25 years, mainly research Virginia and North Carolina. And I've been doing genealogy presentations for about 22 years. And I'm also a blogger, which I'll give you the address later in this presentation. Next slide, please. So I want to start off talking about places that you can obtain North Carolina records, dates, or other info. And some of these are not North Carolina specifically, but I'll point those out. Oral history, during your oral history, you may be given information during that time on specific marriage dates or years and so forth. And so that gives you a clue to, if you want to find a license and so forth. Vital Statistics Office, the North Carolina Vital Statistics Office. The counties began to send the marriage license information to the statistic office in 1962. So as Taneya mentioned, at the county level where you have all these records, and if you order from the Vital Statistics Office, then it's going to be more expensive. So as Taneya pointed out, be a good idea to start with the county, unless you find it online. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the online databases. Newspapers, The census, the 1900 and 1910 census, give an indication of, it states the year, the amount of years that a couple has been married. And so that gives you a clue as far as when to look for a marriage license. Obituaries, of course, Bible records, sometimes tombstones. That might be rare, but I have seen pictures of some tombstones that give the marriage date. Wedding programs, libraries and archives, county or city register of deeds office, as we already pointed out, online databases and indexes, and even books. Next slide. And so it's already been mentioned with Family Search, the different databases, and as Taneya mentioned, that those would be posted in the chat notes. Not on any of your databases, whether it's Ancestry or whether it's Family Search, not everything is, all marriage records are in there. It depends on what has been digitized. Also, for example, and I'll show you some examples in a little bit, your Ancestry, there's a register that was done. And sometimes you may not find the marriage license, even though that exists. And so you may need to contact the county to get a marriage license, but it may have a register where your ancestor is listed. Next slide, please. With the North Carolina Marriage Records database, it has a lot of information in that database. It has marriage bonds, licenses, certificates, and registers, as well as indexes and abstracts to the various records in 87 North Carolina counties. There's also a marriage index database. So whatever you can find online, that's more added information. Of course, we know that not everything is online. So therefore, sometimes you need to contact the county or the state. Next slide, please. So the first type of record I want to talk about that was from 1866 to 1868 is cohabitation records. As many of you know, those of you who trace enslaved ancestors, you know that if the couple began to cohabitate or live together as man and wife during slavery period, they were not able to be married legally. And so for those who were alive at the end of the Civil War, who were married or cohabitated and they wanted to remain together, various enslaved states, they had registrations where they had to go to the courthouse or either go to a justice of peace to validate their marriage. Essentially, with the validation, saying that, we start cohabitating at a certain point. So one source of information, and this is research, I know that many of the libraries are closed, but is Dr. Barnetta McGee White, who wrote "Somebody Knows My Name: Marriages of Free People in North Carolina." This is a great resource, 3 volumes, because she did extensive research on the counties who had surviving records, and and she talked about where these original records were found, if they were microfilmed, and so forth. Some of the things that is mainly an index as far as the book. It has a husband and wife index, or then it has an index by the wife under the county of the ones that were found. Dr. McGee White also talked in those records about, in particular with Halifax County, such as you see on the screen, that the original records are in the courthouse. In many cases, the records are mixed with other things. And so if she found they were mixed in another book or they were loose certifications, she indicated that. And then depending on the county, she would give some of her insight about the things that those records tell you. Next slide, please.
And those cohabitation records are also available online too.
Yes. So in that database, in particular with the one with Ancestry, you may find cohabitation records, and you'll find the digital images. I assume it's completed for most of them, instead of having to go to microfilm and so forth.
And so I know that the wiki on Family Search will tell you which counties have them extant and which don't.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, so the wiki is great as well. And it gives you the counties. It'll give you whether it's in the state archives or microfilm, or, it'll tell you where you can find these records if they exist. And so these cohabitation marriage records were done between 1866 and 1868. And it was a law that was established in March 1866 by the North Carolina General Assembly that it was called an act concerning Negroes and persons of color. And as I mentioned earlier, to document the marriages of newly freed slaves. And keep in mind that couples who began cohabitating during slavery did not, some of them may have decided not to stay together after they were free. But for those who did, they had to go to, as I said, go to the Justice of Peace or either to the registrar or the Register of Deeds. And it varies as far as the type of information that was recorded. For example, with this particular record, and this is my third great grandfather, who was in Warren. He lived both in Warren County and Granville County. And so with this particular marriage, even though I find records with him back and forth across the border, as well as other members of his family, I know the picture is kind of hard to read, but this particular one says, before me, John H. Bullock, a justice of the peace of said county, personally appeared slaves Andrew Bullock and Mariah Bullock of said county. I'm sorry, this is his parents, Ottaway's parents. So these are my fourth great grandparents. Lately slaves, but now emancipated, and acknowledged that they do cohabitate together as man and wife, and the said cohabitation commenced in 1828. So John H. Bullock, with him being a justice of peace, as I do my research, in particular on my Bullock ancestors, he is a key figure because I'm not sure if he owned them or for members of his family. However, after slavery, I find him all around them. Next slide, please.
So I just wanted to also add to that in North Carolina, this, these started with the Freedmen's Bureau, but in North Carolina and Virginia, as a matter of fact, the General Assembly actually put this into law that these couples were to come forth and register. Unfortunately, It cost 25 cents and not everybody had 25 cents. So that's one reason why you may not find every single marriage notated in these records.
Right. And also, and I forgot to point that out, that it was considered a misdemeanor if they did not register their marriage. And there were two different dates given, I think 1866 and then 1868, they were given deadlines. So there was, I didn't find what the penalty was, but it's in the law, it said that it was a misdemeanor. So on this particular one, as I mentioned, with the cohabitation marriage records, were different, depends on who was taking the information. So this particular one is Granville County, North Carolina. And this is my third great grandfather, Ottaway Bullock, who was the son of Andrew and Mariah. And so this particular one reads, this day came before me Ottaway Bullock and Mina Bullock, and say that they have been living as man and wife for about 10 years and agreed to remain as such. And so they appeared before instead of appearing before the Justice of Peace, they appeared before the Register of Deeds clerk. Next slide, please. So with regard to marriage licensing and that period of time, different counties have various marriage registration methods or indexing. Of course, indexing would be to locate marriage records in a quick way. Sometimes the marriage records were in books. Sometimes they are loose papers. Like, for example, it's been years since I've been to Warren County's courthouse or Register of Deeds, but they were like 8.5 by 14 paper, and they were folded in 3, and they're in a little pull-out drawer that's for that size. So you'll find the marriage licenses or record or the registration and so forth indexes in different forms. And so this is an example of in Vance County, North Carolina, of a marriage register. And of course, over time, it depended on who was keeping the records as far as what information they would have. So you have in yellow, you have my ancestors, my second great grandparents, or rather my great grandparents rather, George Johnson and Belle Bullock Johnson. So I talked earlier about clues. And so one of my clues to the year that they got married was in Grandma Bell's obituary, where it simply said that she married in 1914. And I believe it said Vance County. So she lived between Vance and Warren. So that gave me that clue. This marriage index in Halifax County, North Carolina, is with my ancestor Plummer Thornton. And for some periods of time, and perhaps some of you have found this, where during the period where there should have been marriage licenses, for whatever reason, they don't exist. So the only thing you may have to document the marriage is a marriage index or a marriage registration. Next slide, please.
Hey, Drew, I had something I was supposed to say when I did my part about the register.
Okay.
That it was in 1868 that the Register of Deeds actually became required to keep the marriage registers. Mm-hmm. And so that's probably why those of us who do this work, we see more after that date, even though they were starting to trickle in from 1850 on. But at 1868, the ordinance was passed that they had to be kept by the Register of Deeds. So we have a pretty complete record after that.
Okay, great information. As I said, the marriage registers and indexes vary. And so this particular one was in 1981. And notice, a lot of times we in order to find a marriage license or any kind of record, we assume that the event occurred in the place where our ancestors lived, or at least where we know them to live. But notice in yellow, and so the first one is my father, Roy Lee Pair, to his second wife. And so notice they were residents of Newport News, and I wouldn't have known to look for anything elsewhere because he was born in Greensville County, Virginia, but he moved to Newport News as a child and lived there the remainder of his life. But so you see, with the ones that are highlighted, that this was Halifax County, North Carolina, but these people, for whatever reason, they came to Halifax from wherever they lived to marry. So with the online databases and indexes, that's good. One of the advantages of those are to, you may discover records about your ancestor in other locations, places that you might not have thought of. Next slide, please. So this is an example of an older marriage register. This is my ancestor, my third great-grandfather, Ottaway Bullock, his second marriage. I'm a descendant of the first wife, who, Mommy Bullock, who both of them were enslaved. And of course, they went to register their cohabitation. And so take a look at this, where this particular register has much more information, such as the age of the couple, gives the witnesses, the minister, and so forth. And so, especially in cases where you cannot find a license, this gives you a little bit more detail, which we'll talk a little bit more about the parts of a license and some of the things that are noted on this registration in the next slide. And you can go to the next slide with an example of a marriage license. As I mentioned, a lot of the older marriage licenses in North Carolina, they were on long paper, like 8.5 by 14. And so you have two parts to the document. You have at the top, you have where like the registration information to register to get married in whatever given county. One of the things that I was noticing as I was looking at the various marriage licenses that I have from North Carolina is that the application info, the person who's applying for the license, is different from the groom. And I noticed, like, from, let's say, the 1860s or 1870s to probably the early 1900s. Now, I did call several Register of Deeds offices in North Carolina, and of course, the staff there had no idea where that was done. So I believe Renate mentioned that with researching other people listed on these marriage records, because in some cases I know who they are. In this particular case, where I believe it's George B. Bullock, I'm not sure who he is, but he could have a family connection. So I'll definitely research him.
Drew, I know we're getting short on time, so I need to stop interrupting you. But last night I was thinking about our conversation about this, and it occurred to me that, and maybe one of our viewers knows, I'm wondering if this could be the origin of the whole best man thing. Because, even,
Okay.
that person is
Yeah.
kind of vouching for the groom who's applying for the license. And he's
Yeah,
kind
that
of
could be.
vouching for him or standing by him, so to speak, stand by you. Well, no, that'd be a different thing. But maybe that's where the whole, thing of having a best man originated.
That's possible. I also thought about with the marriage bonds where you had a bondsman. I was wondering, was that a carryover from those
Yeah.
types of records?
Yeah.
But your suggestion, that's a possibility as well.
Well, I think both could be true.
Mhm.
Right.
That
Mhm.
it's because maybe that's who the bondsman was, kind of essentially your best man, even though they weren't, I don't think, using that terminology back then. So anyway,
Right.
there we go.
Interesting point. Yeah.
So with the other parts of the license, of course, you have the name of the person, which I talked about, the name of the person that's applying for the license, which, definitely research everybody that's named if you can. The name of the man to be married, the full name, the residence, age. So in this case, where Ottaway Bullock married in Granville County, but you will also want to know your geography because I'm not from there. But your geography is both of those counties are adjacent to each other, and so I discovered a lot of traffic back and forth of my ancestors between Warren County and Granville County. So in this case, the second marriage was in Granville. So the age of the person, whether they were white or colored or whatever race, it depends on the time period.
Yeah.
The father of the man to be married. So in other words, the father or mother of both the bride and groom. And this, whether or not they were living or dead, that has been a huge key with my North Carolina research. And I'm sure a lot of other researchers with determining other information, whether the previous generation, whether they're alive or dead during the time of the event of their children. So, as I said, bride and groom information, age, residence, and so forth. Go to the next slide, please. So I want to show some examples, give you some examples of how this has benefited my research, in particular with Ottaway Bullock. It should be I thought there was a slide before that. Did you skip? I'm sorry.
So.
Okay, never mind. Okay, this just shows a marriage license from, I believe, the 1940s. This is one of my great uncles, just to show you with the changing of the format, whereas as I mentioned, you have the longer license, the longer sheet of license when the original forms. And with this, notice under applied, at the top, where there's no one listed. It's just a couple name and so forth. So perhaps by that time, or even a little bit prior, things had changed with the person who applied for the license.
Mm-hmm. And you've got those
next slide, please.
great witness names down there to be researched too.
Right. Yeah, and I'm sorry, and I didn't point that out with Ottaway's license with the witnesses. Definitely with my Bullock research, because I've met other researchers, other descendants of some of the people he was around. We're not sure if we can, but we know they knew each other because they were neighbors and so forth. So in one of the recognizable names on Ottaway's marriage license, the second marriage license was Ransom Bullock, who one of his descendants, we live in the same city and we have done some research together. So in terms of what, because of the uniqueness of the North Carolina marriage records, in particular, whether it indicates whether the parent is alive or dead at the time of the event, the marriage event of their children. One of the things I've been able to determine with my third great grandfather, Ottaway Bullock, because as we know, death records, which we talked about next week, they didn't come about until 1913, is in comparing his marriage, his second marriage was in 1873, his third marriage was in 1879. So as I mentioned with the second marriage, it indicates that the parents were living. But in 1879, it indicates that both parents were dead. So for those fourth great grandparents, I could determine their death occurred somewhere between that time. So that gives me something. Next slide, please. And to further the research with Ottaway, you want to make sure you trace siblings and children of or children of your ancestors. Don't make the mistake like I did early in my research when I told one of my elderly aunts, as she started going on and on about the family, about her enslaved grandmother, and then she started talking about the grandmother's children, and then she said about them, and initially I said no, but then I had to go back to her and say, yes, I need to know, because I needed to trace them to find something on my ancestors. So in looking at the children of Ottaway, he had apparently 24 children.
Whoa.
I know the names of 20 of them. And looking at two of his children, whereas Oscar Bullock, who got married in 1906 and said that Ottaway was alive, and then Nathan Bullock got married in 1907 and it said that he was dead. So that gives me a time frame.
Absolutely.
To that information. Next slide. And as I close, this is just some contact information. You can email me. I also have a blog, www.findyourfolks.blogspot.com. And I'm on Facebook and Twitter. So feel free to contact me if you desire. And last slide.
Oh.
So I hope that I've given you some information that will help you advance your research, in particular with your North Carolina research, but some of those things can be applied to other things. And so just keep in mind the various places to find marriage info. If you have enslaved people that you're researching in North Carolina, that the cohabitation records exist for most of the counties. And keep in mind the things that the marriage registers, indexes, marriage licenses, and all those things that can tell you, and combining all those resources, you can add more to your family story. Happy hunting. Thank you very much.
All right.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so
Great
much,
overview.
Drusilla.
Yes.
All right.
It's good to have examples too, right? Because I find that as you're doing your own research, you can have that example in your frame of mind that you shared. So thank you.
Right. And looking at your records again, because some things I didn't notice years ago.
Yes. So I've missed the chat because I had to use my screen, but Taneya, before we go into a couple of announcements, is there anything you need to bring up from the chat?
Yeah, I know we've had some good questions, and I think
so we'll save those for the after chat.
We can save those, but it's just a general comment or a discussion that's been going on in the chat is the importance of understanding the geography, right? So we touched on that because people would travel between where they lived and maybe going to a larger city. And so you see people crossing state lines, even not only just county to county lines. So there's an interesting discussion going on in the chat as people share their experiences and their families.
Oh, wow. I can see that I've missed a lot. I'll have to read it after the show.
Yes.
But Drusilla, thank you for all that helpful information. And there's so many things I wanted to comment on. I did want to just quickly say that how important the piece that she was talking to us about with seeing whether the parents were living or deceased, because a lot of times we did not have as Drusilla said, we didn't have the death certificates yet until 1913, but you can really use that information to get a tight window for when an ancestor may have died when there's no death certificate. And I know I'm saying what she already said. I just want to reiterate that.
It's worth repeating.
Yes. And then for the cohabitation records, for me, if you've ever heard my talk, Finding Calvin, you know that the cohabitation record was the document I found that actually informed me that my ancestor, my great-grandparents had been enslaved, even though I assumed they had been enslaved because my research was pointing that way. That is a document that can actually confirm it because of that line that says lately slaves, but now emancipated. So it's the valuable record to let you know how long they've been together as a couple, but it's also a valuable record for those of us who do descend from enslaved ancestors to be able to prove that enslavement. So I thank you. I look forward to looking back over this segment, rewatching the segment to hear everything Drew had to say. And I hope that our guests have gotten a lot out of that.
Yeah.
So
something.
Yes.
I just like to commend Taneya and Renata for doing this. This is just fantastic, especially during this pandemic.
Yeah.
It's fantastic that you all are doing this to give us something more positive to think about and to learn while some of us are still in quarantine. And I just want to point out one more thing that I forgot to mention. Speaking of quarantine, even though we're not able to, a lot of us are not able to go to the courthouse or libraries and so forth. But one of the things I've done during this quarantine was to contact them by phone because they are still working, libraries, as well as a registered deeds office. They're still working to ask them questions. Maybe I didn't do the proper documentation, or maybe I want to get a document through mail or so forth. I've been able to get those things. So don't let your research stop just because we're in quarantine. There's still people there in the offices and see what information you can get.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
That. Okay. So let me share my screen. My screen is already sharing, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Boy, what a day I'm having today. I hope this isn't just a day for me. So coming up next on July 4th, yes, we are going to continue to have our show as scheduled on the first Saturday in July. It's the 4th of July, but we're on so early that we feel like if you're having the cookout or whatever you're doing that day, that hopefully you can still spend a few minutes with us in the early afternoon or depending on what time zone you're in that morning. We will be talking about death records that day, death records. So we started with birth, we went to marriage, and now we're going to get that last vital record-y kind of thing out of the way and talk about death records. So please join us on July 4th at 12:30 p.m. Eastern time so that we can have yet another discussion about these very important vital records. I am having thunder, so I don't know if it's coming through my microphone.
Yeah, I just heard it. I'm having that as well in my ear.
Drusilla and I both live in Newport News, Virginia, but our city is a long, narrow city. I believe it's 26 miles long and 3.5 miles wide. Drusilla lives at one end of the city and I live at the other end, and we can be having very different weather, but you're hearing the thunder too? Okay.
Yeah, I just heard it a few minutes ago, yes.
So there's our contact information. Just to reach us, Taneya and I together, North Carolina Summer Series 2020 @gmail.com. We got so many wonderful emails after the first episode, and I'd just like to thank everyone who reached out. And then our personal information is right there for you if you want to jot that down or even screenshot it. And
we should also put that in the description. We can put that there too for people.
Yes, that'd be great.
On YouTube, you mean?
Yeah, including Drusilla's as well, so people have it handy.
Okay, yes, we can certainly do that. So now, again, just as last time, I want to just tell you that is the end of our presentation segment of the show, and we are now ready to go into our after chat. You know what?
I was going to say announcement.
I forgot something because we didn't do it last time. Okay, so I'm just going to pull up this one website to show you all, and this is so special that Legacy Family Tree, the premier site for genealogy webinars, is offering free webinar weekends in June. That means you can get access to this content for free. You don't have to subscribe. There's no catch to it. It's completely free. So the first weekend was last weekend, and all of the workshops were about technology. So you can see, I'm not going to go through all of them.
So Renata, we're still seeing your PowerPoint.
You are?
Yeah, you'd have to share to your browser to see the web page.
Hold on. This is not Renata's day.
It's okay, Renata.
It's fine.
Right, there you go.
Here we go. Yes.
So, sorry, let's start again. So free webinar weekends in June, completely free. You just go to Family Tree Webinars /June. It's right there, or you can Google it, but we will put that link also in our description. And Technology Weekend was last weekend. We missed that, so I'm not going over that. But this current weekend, there are 6 workshops being offered, and it's focused on Great Britain research. I can tell you that all of these presenters are wonderful. And the way it works is you do one registration and it gives you access to all of the free weekend content, and you watch it whenever you want to. So there's
Great.
no, on that particular weekend. So there's no time for each presentation. So if you register for this weekend, you have till midnight tomorrow to watch whichever one of these you'd like to watch. After that, they go behind the paywall. And so you would have to be a member to watch them. And then next weekend, June 26th through 28th, is African American Research. And again, you have 6 just fabulous workshops to choose from. And even one from me. And I mentioned a few minutes ago, I mentioned Finding Calvin. And so you can watch that one at your leisure anytime next weekend up through, I'm pretty sure it's midnight on Sunday. And then after that, you would be behind a paywall. So we have already recorded these webinars for you. They're not live. You won't have a question and answer, but you can, if you watch mine and you have a question, you know how to contact me. So we just wanted to share that today. All right, so now we are ready to start talking about marriage records. We've gone a little long today. I hope we still have some friends with us.
We do have some friends with us. People are sticking around and looks like they're finding it helpful. So maybe we can answer some of the questions that people have been asking.
All right. So you've got it, Taneya, because I can't see the questions right now.
I was taking note of them, so I'll go back through them. So one of the first questions that was asked was to understand more about the minimum age requirements. So, what was the minimum age of marriage, and perhaps has it changed at all over the years?
Yes. So when I was researching this, almost each site that I got the information from had a different age, and they weren't saying to me, it started as this, it changed to that, and then it became that. So I saw a couple of places where it was referenced as 15. And then I saw one where it was referenced as 17. And then I do know for sure that at one point in time, it became 21, which is what it still is now. So if you were under those respective ages, you had to have parental consent to marry.
Yeah. I saw somewhere where the minimum age was 14, of course, with parental consent.
Was that in North Carolina?
I believe so. I don't remember where.
Yeah, I didn't see that one. So that's 4 then.
That variability can be interesting sometimes, can it?
Yeah.
Right.
So, and someone else asked, were the ban objections also publicized? So if there was an objection, was that noted somehow?
That is a wonderful question. I don't know. And if someone is in the chat, because I know we do have some of our expert friends there in the chat room. So if you know the answer to that, please feel free to suggest it in the chat. But I don't know. I know that the newspapers back in the 1800s were like gossip columns. And so I can imagine that it could have been that somebody might have, said, so-and-so announced their bans, but lo and behold, there will be no wedding.
Right.
And I actually feel like I read something like that said that the guy was already married, already had a wife. I feel like I read something like that at some point.
Yeah.
Now,
that's a very good point about the newspapers, because they would tell the whole story, or
quick
to tell it.
All your business.
All your business.
So, yeah. So we'll have to look and see if we can find anything on that.
Yes. Yeah, we'll have to look into that.
Anything
Great.
else?
Another question was, will bonds always denote a free person of color? So you share the example of the free person of color, but is that something that will be denoted on the actual document?
No, it will not. That depends on how things would be done in that county. So I knew those ancestors were free people of color. So that's why I was able to share that with you. but no, that's not something that was necessarily noted.
Well, it may have been noted. I did see something. Of course, I'm not looking at. I wasn't looking at the bond, but an index of it, I guess, or
yeah, it
transcript.
could be. But
Where
I
it
thought
did
the question
indicate.
was would it
Will it
always be? And
always?
so
Oh,
no,
okay. Yeah,
because it
you're
would be
right.
not.
Yeah, so it could. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yes. So we had several, like I told you. One
I
viewer
hate
said
that I can't see it.
so one viewer noted that they found a marriage bond with the date of December 3rd, 1866. Then they found a certificate for January 9th, 1867. What does that
Yes.
mean?
Because and that's great because
Mhm.
as I mentioned during my segment, the bond is not evidence that a marriage ever took place.
Right.
So the bond and the license are like getting permission. Like you can walk around with this and say, hey, we can get married whenever we want to,
Mhm.
but you don't have to get, and that's still true today. You get a marriage license, but that doesn't mean you have to go get married that same day. So
Right.
that's what the bond is. It lets the people know that you want to get married, you're putting your money up, or your bondsman is putting their money up, saying that there should be no impediment to you getting married, but your actual wedding date is whenever you set it for.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
a great example of how that could work out.
Yeah. And here's a general comment. Oh, I'm sorry, Drew, were you going to say something?
Yes, well, of course, I'm talking about the marriage license. I know the question was about the bond, but the key with the minister or whoever's performing the ceremony to return the license to the courthouse or to the deeds office, in particular with South Carolina. I heard a case where this is for Virginia, but a person who had married or thought they were married for 50 years, but when they went to find a license where they got married, it was not returned by the minister.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I also just want to make sure that everybody's aware that even though we're talking about formalized marriage records, I just want to read a few of the other places where you can possibly find that a marriage has taken place, in your family or home sources, church sources, Bibles, diaries, journals, letters and photographs, any historical records made by your family members, like maybe they did an autobiography, or they've had a family reunion, so they've put information in the family reunion booklet. Also, the churches have records of marriages that have been performed there. So these are just kind of like some secondary sources that if you can't find a formal document, a legal document about a marriage, but you're still trying to find out when your ancestors got married or who they married, those are sources that you might find those things.
Yes. And
Or
so
Taneya?
maybe, do you have time for maybe 2 more questions?
I think so.
All
I
right.
know we've
I know.
run long today.
Yeah.
We've run very long today, but I feel more relaxed than last time when we were
Yeah.
rushing. And
Yeah.
now I know y'all can hear
Oh, I
that
heard
thunder.
that one. Yes.
That's a bad one. But yeah, let's go ahead and
Okay.
hope that my power and internet will hold
All
up.
right.
And if not, if it doesn't, I'll see y'all in 2 weeks on July 4th,
Yeah.
and Taneya will finish up.
We'll finish it off. But yeah,
All
so
right.
we hope you stay around. So the question was, why did someone else have to apply for the license instead of the groom and the bride?
So I'm not trying to answer all the questions.
Yeah.
You want to do it, Drusilla?
We're speculating because I didn't get, I contacted some registered deeds office and the staff, they didn't know because, I guess they're dealing more in the present than us. They had no idea, but we speculated that it could be like the bondsman possibly, or Renate said the best man. We don't know exactly, but.
Yeah, I interpret it as having someone to vouch for the groom.
Right, and that sounds logical.
Yeah, that he's legit. He's not married. He's not taken a vow of celibacy. I think it's all, like Drew said earlier, that it's rooted in the same premises that the bands and the bonds were established on. It's just that as the years have gone on, we've become less formalized about it.
Yeah. Great. And then lastly, if money is put up for a bond, who gets the money? I mean, you touched on this in your segment, I believe, Renata.
Right. So most of the time, the actual money really never changed hands.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like a promissory kind of a note. But if money did change hands, it would go to the clerk, the county clerk, and it would then be returned after the time period was over or the marriage took place and there were found to be no problems. But my understanding from my research is that it was more of a promise to pay than an actual payment.
Yeah. Great.
And I'm thinking maybe they had to prove that they had it, because anybody can walk in and say, okay, here's my, I'm going to say I have 500 pounds, whatever that translates into today's time. But I feel like they had to somehow prove that they had it or have it
that they had
held
the
in
means.
some way.
Yes. Great. Well, I really think that people have enjoyed it from reading the comments. And it's funny, some people have even been researching along the way, sharing how many found a marriage record for or a death certificate while she was looking. Yeah, a birth certificate for one of her relatives and a marriage and divorce. So great way to put it in action.
So Taneya, if you could, before we close, can you just share a few of the comments from our viewers? And
yes, happy to. So people were saying, great presentation. Arif commented that she found a canceled marriage applications where her grandparents attempted to elope 5 years before they actually got married.
Oh, okay.
So that's a very interesting find.
Did she say where that was? Because I know she's got Washington and Tyrrell.
She does have Washington, but she didn't say if this was in Washington.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, when we go, we'll have to get her on that trip too. All three of us can go.
Absolutely. We'll get her from Dallas, Texas.
So people saying great job, very informative. People definitely saying they're coming back to tune in on July 4th. So we will look forward to seeing people there.
Maybe we'll have fireworks.
Maybe we've got thunder happening in Winston-Salem and South Carolina right now. Maybe there's a big system over the states, but just great comments, good show, great points being made. As we look at the experience levels, we have some intermediates, some beginners, and some advanced. So a nice mix.
Thank you. And thank you to our advanced researchers who are spending this time with us, because, it means a lot that you're taking your time. And I hope that, just as, like I said earlier, as we found little new tidbits for us, that something is helping you along the way too. I do want to kind of just put a little something out there to encourage people to join us on July 4th. We have something special that we're going to be announcing on July 4th that we're going to be doing on the 5th Saturday. So we'll tell you about it then, but please come back for no other reason, so you can find out what we're doing on the 5th Saturday. And it's not the 5th Saturday of July. There is no 5th Saturday of July. I had thought there was, but there wasn't. It's the 5th Saturday of August, but we're going to wait till July to start talking about it, because it's something that you're going to need to register for. So we'll tell you about that in July. And if that's all, I just want to thank our guest, my friend, Drusilla Pair, my fellow city person. Drusilla and I are also in the same OGS chapter. And so it's been great knowing her and being able to share research with her. Our ancestors both lived in Warren County, North Carolina, so we have that in common. But thank you so much. Thank you, Taneya. Thank you to our viewers. And I promise I'm going to get myself together. So one thing I just want to say is, we're not pros at this. And we told you from the beginning, this is something we just wanted to try. It's supposed to get better every time, so I feel bad about today. But we hope you're enjoying it, and we are enjoying you.
We are definitely enjoying it.
Everybody have a wonderful rest of the weekend. Happy Father's Day to all the
Yes.
fathers out there. I don't know if my daughters are on again, but my oldest daughter has a birthday tomorrow. Can y'all believe I have a child who's
Oh.
almost 40? I'm not going to say her
Ooh-wee.
age because she might not like that. But yeah, just everybody have a great week. And thank you so much.
Yes. Bye, everyone. And subscribe to the
Bye.
YouTube channel if you haven't yet.
Yes,
All right.
subscribe.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.